moving forward. Everything about the Knicks kind of a mess. On the floor, 10 out of 12 with the losses. Then you get the Charlie Rosen piece where he talks about Melo basically in his time in New York being done. And Melo has responded. He said, if Phil Jackson doesn't want him in New York, quote, that's a conversation that we should have. If that's what's coming from that side and what's coming on from our side, I haven't thought once about it, to be honest with you. I hear all the rhetoric, but maybe it's time that we talk. And he goes on beyond that. So there's a lot of layers here. But I want to start with Phil, okay? How much is he to blame for the fact that we're at a point where Melo is talking through the media about his situation with the Knicks, in terms of his lack of one-on-one with Melo about this over the past couple of months?
I'm going to let Brent answer that.
That's not fair, because you know Phil.
Yeah,
I understand.
I know him. That's not.
You know the way he works. But
Yes.
This is the thing. What's been problematic is that there's a history about, Phil earlier on in the year, sort of needling Melo, talking about the ball stopping. I don't know how much that was needling other than a player assessment. What's odd about Phil talking about a player, though, is that you normally don't see general managers in those instances talking about what's going on the floor. Now, it's understandable with Phil Jackson being the great coach that he is, that he would start talking shop with regards to the offense and how things are operating. But there's been a cavalcade of things going on with the Knicks outside of even the Melo situation, with Jeff Hornacek having to answer questions about the Derrick Rose situation after the game, having no knowledge of something like that, and nobody from management, quite frankly, coming out and making any sort of statement about how they were going to handle it, what they were doing internally. None of that came from upstairs with the Knicks situation last week. And then Derrick Rose made some comments on Saturday after missing that game, talking about how Jeff Hornacek needs to push this team a little bit further. And that was coming from Derrick Rose, who missed a game earlier on in the week. So there's a lot going on in New York. Unfortunately, it has very little to do with basketball and a lot more to do with the interpersonal relationships between players and coaches. And right now, some of their players and the management.
Yeah, look, I can feel in my body already. A lot of what is happening here, I can recall happening in LA at times. The only difference is Phil was the coach.
Right.
So therefore, a lot of this communication and a lot of these struggles, this tug of war and this push and pull between the direction the team was going in, and what was most important, which is the team result, happened in the film room, happened in the locker room, happened behind closed doors.
Because he was there.
Yeah, well, he was the coach. He is now the president and GM, and therefore, he does not have that same position that he had when he really pulled the strings, right, and was the puppet master. A few things that are at play here is first thing that comes to mind is that when the struggles are greater off the floor than they are on the floor, meaning that you're not fighting the opponent, you're fighting yourselves, and you're trying to flush out halfway through the season who you are as a team, then you start to dissect the individuals that make up that team. You start to go in and look, and you start at the top, because those are the ones that carry the most responsibility, right? And Carmelo this is not the first time that Carmelo has been put on Front Street or on blast when it comes to the lack of success. He'll tell you himself, when things go wrong, I always get the blame, right? Well, that's kind of what happens.
Isn't that his job?
But no, it's not his job. It is unfortunately what happens to star players, right? Because they're paid the big contracts. They are the cornerstone of the franchise. You build around them, and therefore you, as ownership and front office, you look for wins. That's how you evaluate the success of building around an individual. Now, the statement that his time and his usefulness may be over in New York, I disagree with 100%, okay? Now,
100% you disagree with that?
That statement that he is, I'll read it. The only sure thing is that Carmelo Anthony has outlived his usefulness in New York. To say that a player of Carmelo Anthony's stature and resume and abilities cannot be used in New York, I think is ludicrous.
Well, I think
now.
Okay,
hold
ahead.
on.
Go ahead.
How they're using him,
yes,
needs to be addressed. Now,
well
that's where the conversation is going to be had now, right? Because Carmelo may still see himself as useful in certain ways, and New York may not see that anymore.
Right.
Right now, what's hanging in the middle of the room, the elephant in the room, is the no trade clause.
That's correct.
Right? Now, you have to look at Phil Jackson's own presence in New York the last few years. It's been kind of rocky. He has not really cemented himself as of equal presence as Carmelo has over the last 5 years there, 6 years, where he is a staple in New York.
Putting it nicely. Yes.
That's okay. So now Phil has made it very clear he is staying in New York to do this job, right? It's been very clear the last month that is where his focus is, which now we have a conversation about, are they both going to move forward together in New York, or is it time to part ways? And I think you're starting to see that not only Phil having these comments that he's making publicly, the New York fan base has now started to get into the evaluation. And so it's one thing for one person to say we're losing value with you. It's another thing for the entire organization, the entire city to start to question whether it's time to part ways.
For a long time in New York, the conversation with Knicks fans was the Allen Houston contract, which was $100 million, and how it was great, and then, bounced around the rim a bunch against the Heat. We paid him $100 million, and then we kind of suffered for it moving forward. Took a long time. Now you look fast forward to Melo. He's been a great player for a long time. No one's taking that away. But isn't it fair to put out there that he's halting the growing process of a team that needs to take steps back before they go forward?
Yeah, I think that's what you have to start to dissect from what it is that's going on here about the Kristaps Porzingis and about where he's going to be in the next couple of years. The idea, though, that last year this team sat at 22-22 under Derek Fisher, made moves to get Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah, signed Noah to a 4-year contract, and that this year you were going to come in with that kind of cachet, that kind of star power or the credentials of some of these players, and that you're not that competitive. I know it's Jeff Hornacek and a new coach, so it's a new style, and guys have to get themselves together, but the approach to the games, you could say, has been anything but inspiring from the Knicks at times. And we're kind of kicking the Knicks team while they're down here, but they have not gravitated or they've not gravitated at all towards the defensive end of the floor. It's been problematic since the beginning of the year. And you have issues going on where now you're looking at the way the management is handling the players. The Rose situation, case in point, where accountability kind of goes out the window and everybody else is scratching their heads about, well, how is it that you're handling the respect for the game that your players have? And these are guys that have been around and should know better how they communicate to the team.
I'm going to say two names really quickly because we got to go. J.R. Smith, Mon Shumpert. They outlasted their usefulness in New York.
Then one with LeBron.
They found someplace else, right? And they worked out, okay? Carmelo, whether he's a New York Knick or somewhere else, he's going to be useful. And we'll see if it leads to a championship for him, which he should want for himself. He was sold a vision. Mm-hmm. He was a free agent. He was sold a vision to stay in New York. He stayed. He's gone through 2 free agent seasons. One didn't return anything of the stature to add to him, so he wasn't a lone star.
And several coaching
changes. This year, 2 guys come in, Rose and Noah. Fortunately, not the Noah of 3 years ago.
Well,
so maybe it is time for him to look at himself and go, you know what, man, I want out here. I want out. He's not going to lose the love from New York. They love him for who he is and what he's meant to them. He's got to go get a championship and just go play the last remaining years of his career